I'm very glad. I'm very glad to be here. I think this is my first webinar to some Egypt audience from the Egypt, and I've been in that country many, many times. I love to always come back. So about my topic, I'm gonna discuss about OT cybersecurity. So it's more like an introduction, basics to the OT cybersecurity, and I'm gonna squeeze it into the 1 hours. So about me quickly, my name is Saltanat Mashirova. Currently, I'm based in the Dubai, UAE. So I used to work for Honeywell for a long time. So I was a global product management lead, reporting to Houston. But because when it comes to the global role, it means you travel a lot. Um, I had even per month like 3, 4 travels, which I make a decision to move on to the local role in order to focus more with the kids. So my background, so I've been in OT cybersecurity for a long time. So it's not that I came just appeared it. No, I've grown up in OT family. I would say oil and gas family. And I was an OT cybersecurity engineer, architect. Then I moved to the more assessment. Then I moved to the product management lead. Now in CPX, it's, as I said, it's one of the G42 company. It's one of the fastest growing company, and it's a mission to protect the nation. So I'm building the national protection to the UAE, and one of the projects is the OT SOC. So when it comes to the education, yes, so when you're in OT, preferably having engineering background is always good. If you don't have it, it's okay. You can still learn it. I came with engineering background, and my master was from the US UC Irvine. And then, of course, I do have a lot of certificates as well. I think in the cybersecurity industry, keeping up knowledge with the certificates is a must-have. I mean, in my opinion, I don't post my technical certificates anymore, such as, like, you just name it, let's say Fortinet or the vendor specific certificates or Azure or AWS. I believe it gets outdated very often right now. And then, of course, I'm executive advisor for Singaporean government. I'm author of several frameworks as well. So I live with OT cybersecurity. So this is in a nutshell about myself. Let's start about OT cybersecurity. A lot of people get confused. Oh, ICS, oh, OT, or critical infrastructure, whatever it is. They use different terms, or they start fighting with this terminology. So there is a government bodies. So in many governments, like in the United States, in the European Union, in the UAE itself, in the Egypt, in the Saudi Arabia, Australia, just name it, they do have the critical infrastructure entities. So the critical infrastructure is basically a body of system networks that are essential that their continued operation to ensure the security of a given nation. So it's very important for the nation. And then every country has a different entities. Like European Union is extending their critical infrastructure entities with a NIS2 regulation this year. Like if you look other governments, they have a less. But critical infrastructure doesn't equal to the OT. It has a different entities, but it is related to the OT. If you take specifically energies, chemicals, for example, this is taken from the CISA, or nuclears. For example, financial center is not OT much, except ATMs. But like water, transportation, I would say 80-90% related to the OT. That's why we use as we are protecting the critical infrastructure. The industrial control system, there is a terminology. Industrial control system is basically includes the SCADA, supervisor control and data acquisition system, distributed control system, and other control configurations such as PLCs, which are found in the industrial sectors and critical infrastructure. This is ICS according to the NIST. And there is an OT, which is operational technology. So OT is, if you look to the Gartner, it says hardware and software that detects or causes a change through the direct monitoring of control of industrial equipment. So ICS a lot of times are used when it comes to big installation base such as oil and gas, power grid, water. OT, sometimes building management system is also considered to OT. But in order not to complicate our life, we use it ICS/OT. We use it as an interchangeably. So it's okay when you change it. But Gartner this year came up with a terminology, let's use it cyber physical system. So we're moving from ICS to OT to more cyber physical system. So this is a terminology. Oh, I think I moved that. Terminologies that we use. So the next one is what kind of industry relied on ICS? So there is a different types of industry. So and then we like to combine this to the to this. We would like to grouping it because it makes for us easier to understand the architecture, their process. For example, factory automation segments is like automotive, medicals, manufacturing, and then those are we sometimes call it discrete. I don't know, discrete. And the second one is a process industry segments such as chemical, food, pulp and paper, so on and so forth. It's also manufacturing, but it's more different. And mostly in process industry segments, we use batch systems. And then third one is in the energy industry segments such as oil and gas, electricity, nuclear, which are very, very critical. And this is where my background comes in, but I have had an experience in others as well. So those are sometimes used hybrid or continuous, mostly continuous. So why we say continuous, discrete, batch? Because based on this, the cybersecurity priority is based. Like for example, you guys in the IT cybersecurity, you say, okay, in the healthcare for me is important confidentiality, for example, right? For example, in energy industry segments where the continuous, for example, is important, we say availability for us important. For the batch system, we might say integrity is important. For example, I don't want my food to have been added more chemicals than it's required. And then service industry segment, it's mainly, we all know, like logistics, especially when it comes to the airports. If you look at the airports, everything is automated. Airports is like a next city, like it has its own power. It has a baggage handling system, and then we have also the railroad systems right now, which is becoming more automated. All of this comes to the service industry segments. So the so this is industrial, and the next one is I'm gonna just give it a little bit of brief because when I said SCADA, DCS, PLC, it's I think after this session maybe it will be your homework to look at more if you're interested, but it's more technical, that's why I didn't include it. But what I included here is a basic operation of the OT, because in the IT space you usually deal with it's just the servers and clouds and then just the workstations most of the time, whereas in OT you're very, very much of dealing with the operation. And when I say operation, that's why I said you need an preferable to have engineering background. It helps because in the OT environment, first you need to know everything IT, everything cybersecurity, plus you need to know a little bit of electrical engineering, a little bit of automation, mechanical engineering, process safety, in order, and then you need to know the basic operation, how this plant operates. If you don't know that, all of your effort trying to start a cybersecurity program there or to dictate is not going to work. And I'm going to say why. So if we look to this is a very simplified of the operation. The bigger the plan, the complicated it gets. So this is according to the NIST. So this is a controller loop. It utilizes sensors, actuators, and controllers in some controlled process. Any process, we're just taking it as a simplified. So for example, sensor reads from here, produces a measurement. You can think about thermostat at home, for example. It senses the temperature in your room, right? And it sends to the controller. It says a control, for example, if it's you put your, we live in a hot space, we put our temperature to be 21 degrees, and the sensors measured that the room temperature is at 22. It sends to the controller. What controller is going to is interprets the measurements and says, oh, okay, the set point is actually 21. So I need to make sure that we are doing we want to change to the 21, and then it generates this manipulated variable based on this algorithm and set point, and it transmits to the actuators. And the actuator goes and activates basically air conditioner. I'm just explaining this in very basic terminology, but in the real world, actuators can be control valves, it can be breakers, it can be switches, it can be motors, and so on and so forth. And then here we have this is a controller, but if it's a big industrial environment, we do have a human machine interface, which is a HMI, where an operator actually sits and observes what is happening in the environment. If it's needed, it can send in changes to the controller in order to change the process. And then HMI, they'll look to the alarms, what's happening in the environment. And so then this is a basic process that we need to understand. And then let's look at the OT evolution. Why right now we're talking about OT a lot? You might be in this industry, started hearing that a lot, OT, OT, OT. So that's why I joined also to CPX, because they're massively, right now, you're focusing on the protecting the critical infrastructure, especially in OT cybersecurity. And because the first, before we never paid attention, because OT system were mostly air gapped. It has no connection. It didn't have connection. It was operating by itself. Then it started connecting to each other. So we started having Purdue layers, we started having firewalls, and then now we're getting to the IT-OT convergence, which means that we're connecting. It's becoming all about data. You know, we call it right now, especially in the last 2 3 years with an AI, that we we needed data. We needed data for optimization. So same thing, business needs data. So we're getting IT/OT convergence. We're getting more connections, and then we're getting newly designed, engineered cyber physical systems. So let's think about it here. So right now, what's happening, as I said before, OT was very slowly. We started paying attention when the first attack to the OT was a Stuxnet in 2010. But then now, since AI came, now entire, not only organization, but the nation, the presidents are saying we need to embrace the AI, we need to use AI, and the second is the cloud. The OT was so traditional, now we need to use an AI. So what does it mean? It means that the AI requires a lot of data, which requires a lot of connection. And the second thing is the cloud. Cloud is a different story because every nation needs a sovereign cloud, so on and so forth. But it's introducing huge change to the environment that used to be air-gapped environment. And then this is how we're getting more and more connectivity. Recently, it was 2 weeks ago, in the Dubai, there was ADIPEC, which is the oil and gas biggest conference in the Middle East. And the keynote speaker said, they said that right now in oil and gas itself, in the ADNOC, they are already having the 200 use cases of the AI from the wellheads to the trading floor, which means it's becoming more and more, and we need to right now pay more attention, and we need more people who are specialized in this industry. Why I'm saying it's a little bit different than specialized, and I'm going to talk this about now. So what I learned is most of you came from the IT background. If you came from the OT background, you can put it in the chat that you are in OT background, that I will know it. If you're all in IT, then I will. If you're silent, then I know that you're in IT. So we think that in OT, we're using the same technology. It's a Windows system. It's a switch, Cisco firewalls, whatever it is. I can go ahead and start. It doesn't require the specific skills, but it has a huge differences. This is what we have to know before we start even talking about the OT or getting into the OT. So let's start from the performance requirements. So in the OT, most of the time it's not the real time. Response usually consistent. In the IT environment, we have a high throughput, it's just a laptop and we have a high throughput. Delay jitter can be acceptable. Then you can still implement very, very rich access control, such as multi-factor access control, 24 symbols of password, like application access. You can do this very, very, very granular level. Now let's talk about OT. OT, the crucial part is a real-time response is time critical, because if in IT we're dealing about data, in OT it's all about physics. Anything that is impacting the tangible, it has a tangible consequences, which means real-time required means we're making sure that uh, the the pumps or the switches, switch breakers, all of this must be real time. So, and then we don't have the high throughput. Usually it's a modest throughput, and the high delay is not acceptable. So it's not acceptable at all. And then response to human and other emergency interaction is critical because of why? Because the consequences can be very, very much severe. And then access to OT should be strictly controlled but should not hamper or interfere with human machine interaction. It means that in the, for example, I told you HMI operator needs 24/7 access to that HMI. You cannot keep logging out every 5 minutes. Why? Because they can miss a critical alarm. So, or the second thing, you cannot put the 24 characters of password. Why? Because in case of emergency, operators must log on quickly. So some of the access controls that we think are best practice in the IT cannot be implemented in OT. Why? Because of this, the high criticality of the nature of the operation. Then availability requirements, for example, in the IT, we can reboot our server after 6 p.m., let's say. Yes, deficiencies can be tolerated, and especially with the cloud, it's easy to, we have this very much of easy failover. But then the OT is different. You cannot reboot the machines. Sometimes you don't reboot machines for years. The only time that you can reboot a machine if it's a maintenance window. A maintenance window happens once a year or once in 2 years, it depends. And then, of course, because of the availability requirements, we need to have high redundancy systems. And again, it's not about, we don't have, not everything in the cloud, we have a physical machine. That's why we need to have a redundancies. And any outage that we want to plan, it must be scheduled days or weeks in advance. So because of this availability requirements, anything that you're going to implement, anything that you're going to touch it in the production system, it must go, we call it management of change, and very, very much of a pre-deployment testing. And then when we say the pre-deployment testing, it means that we are very much, I'm going to tell this, in the OT, unfortunately, we are very much reliant on the OEM. OEM means I forgot, it's a manufacturers, right? It can be Honeywell, it can be ABB, Schneider, Siemens. We're very, very much reliant on them. And if even Microsoft releases patch, it doesn't mean that we're going to install it, because we need to wait our OEM, the owner of this manufacturing, if it's ABB or not ABB, that they will test the patch system and approve it. Then we can go ahead and start deploying it. And another thing is, we call it like even EDR, XDR solution. We cannot install those solutions in the OT environment easily. Like we cannot come up, I do like this EDR solution from that vendor and I want to install it. No, we need to ask from our vendor which is your approved EDR solution. Most of them, they don't have it even. If they don't have it, it means we're not installing. If they have it, we need to install their EDRs, their approved EDR solutions, because if we install just from the market itself, we're gonna break it. If we're gonna break it, we're gonna lose a guarantee from the OEM itself. So risk management requirement, when it comes to the risk, we're very, very much concerned in IT about the confidentiality. Well, our data is breached, we need to protect our data, and so on and so forth. In the OT, when I have my risk matrix, when I do the risk matrix, my risk matrix first of all starts with a human and safety, meaning it's a human risk like a minor injury, major injury, fatality 1, 2, fatality 7, let's say. then environmental, like loss of containment, explosion. Then we go to the financial risk, such as if the plant is down for a day, it's a several $1 million loss. Then we go to the community also risk, because if it's a high hazardous environment, it can, during the explosion or anything, it can also impact the community which is a nearby. So which means is, and then we go to the reputational risk. Whereas in IT, you mostly manage financial risk, reputational risk, like that. But in the OT, we're most of the concerned about safety. System operation, it's straightforward. It's very easy. We have a Windows. We can patch it very easily. You can, like, using Qualys, whatever it is, with a corporate policy, you can just send it out, and then my Windows can go even if I'm during the meeting. Tell it reboot, right? But in the OT, some of the in some cases we use Windows XP even. Why? Because the problem is, the application itself there, which has been almost, the equipment is run, can be controlled by that application, because the equipment has been 20 years, and this application is only can run in Windows XP. So we don't have a choice. And then the second thing is, a lot of times we do have little computers, RTS PLCs, and they run with a proprietary OS. So all of this are not, it's very complicated to control all of these things. And then resource constraints. Resource constraints means that you do have abundant resources in your computer, in your server, and especially we use in IT already cloud. We're not very much concerned about this anymore. But in the OT, unfortunately, we need to keep in mind the memory, computing resources. I was in the lab. I did in the lab a lot of testing. When I was doing one of the testing on the HMI station, I was doing the forensics. I wanted to take all the memories to the USB. So first I was copying that, and because it has a constraint, unfortunately, my HMI stopped working. So the computing resources are limited. So the communication is very easy. I don't think in IT we ever focus on communication. Everything is encrypted, TCP/IP. We don't care. But in OT, we do have a proprietary protocol. This is the first thing that you learn. The first thing you start learning Modbus, such as protocol DNP3, OPC UA, OPC GA, and so on and so forth. And most of the time, those protocols are not encrypted. And if you remember in previous slide, I told you real-time interaction is very important. And that's why encryption can delay this real-time interaction. And then there is no authentication even. That's why we use a lot of monitoring tools which can dissect those protocols. If you don't know those protocols, it's going to be very hard for you to manage it. And then change management, again, change management is good in the IT, but not very much of a rigid like in the OT. We call it MOC, mostly management of change. So any software change, anything must go, first we need to get a vendor approval. Second, we need to test in our system. Third, we need to only implement in backup system and a redundant. If we have redundancy server A and B, we will first put in a B and wait, and then we'll do an A, then wait. So meaning that for one patching, it will require several months. And then manage support. Again, in the IT, I can go ahead and open the company and I can support many companies. In IT, you have very diversified, but in the OT, you're very dependent on the vendor. If you're a Yokogawa customer, or if you have a Yokogawa Emerson ABB, unfortunately, you're dependent on Yokogawa Emerson ABB. Because why? Because if somebody touches the system and they break it, the OEM cannot guarantee you. So you lose a guarantee if somebody else comes and starts touching your system. So this is very much of a, I would say, headache for the asset owners and operators. And this is most of the time they complain about this. If you hear them, the biggest complaint is this, the number one complaint. They say vendor comes up with a tremendous amount of the support agreement, which is money, and then we have to do that. Yes, so this is one of the biggest problem. It's getting better though. So now, what is the questions that we can ask? So IT and OT has mostly occurred, right? We did it. Can we apply similar controls in IT to OT, that I said? What preventative, detective, and recovery controls should we be focusing on? Where to begin? So again, as I said from my talk, IT challenge. HMI looks like an IT. It's a Windows system. It's running Windows. It's running the older OS and we are running on enterprise. We need to patch it, scan it, and eventually upgrade it. Oh, by the way, is it critical? So this is what we, if somebody comes from the IT background, this is what they ask. But again, we need to make sure that we don't use those mistakes that IT bringing us to our environment. That we make sure we, how does it say, in the IT people, they are very emphasize on vulnerability management. They say, oh, NVIDIA came up with a CVE, we need to patch it today. And then we need to quickly refresh assets, like let's say laptop refresh right now 3 years, right? Then treating OT security as a project, not a continual process. And then, of course, IT is focused very much moving to the cloud. As I said, OT is moving to the cloud, but it's very slow, and it needs to be done very carefully, system by system. You will never move to the cloud. The loops that I showed you, actuators, control, those parts will not be moved to the cloud. Not yet. Not today. Not next year. I don't think so. So this is what I said. This is CIA confidentiality and IT is a paramount. In OT, it's availability, but it's more than that. So we need to make sure we are taking into account process safety, environmental safety, and personal safety. So this is, and plus this is. And if we go to our standard, which is our standard is ISO 62443 that we use as the best practice, they added on top of this 4 additional foundational requirements. So again, in the OT, we need to make sure we are very much focusing on the process. Okay, this is power. We know that power, we have generation, transmission, distribution. Generation power, maybe it's based on using coal, or transmission, how you're transmitting and how you're distributing to the houses of power. Each has its different challenges, different environment, different protocols. Then refiners, oil and gas. Oil and gas is very high hazardous environment, very high hazardous environment. So it's producing, transporting, and refining oil and gas products. A lot of explosions occur in this area if you're here. And then you go to the manufacturing, like a melting and casting and forming the metals. Same thing, very safety environment. And then foods and so on and so forth. Others is the batch management as well. So you need to know that each process, based on this, each process, the application of your OT cybersecurity best practices will be different. Here we are caring a lot about integrity. We don't want our food again, breakfast cereal for our kids have more chemicals, yes? For example, here this is a continuous, especially if it's a pipeline, we cannot, it needs to be delivered the gas. If not, then what's gonna happen? You guys cannot use your cars, right? Power, I mean, the keynote which we had in IDPEC, right now we used to say knowledge is power. It's other way around right now. Power is knowledge, we used to say. Now it's a knowledge is power is knowledge. So with AI, with everything, we are very highly dependent on the power. So I just came back from Denmark, where they are very much moving to the electricity cars. They're trying to use offshore wind, and then a lot of cybersecurity talks around that. So the more we grow in this AI, the more OT becoming very paramount. So attributes I already said about that. So it's we are related to the we are interacting directly with physical system. Again, it's not like it's our laptop and we're only dealing with virtual everything virtual. No, we're interacting with the pumps, we're interacting with the valves, we're interacting with the motors, we're interacting with real physical systems, and it's a running production manufacturing equipment. And as I said, it brings the HSE risks as well. So I'm not going to cover here attacks in OT cybersecurity because the threat intel attacks are completely. It takes another 2-3 hours of the discussion, but it's also for you interesting to read. OT environments, as I said, strict high vendor requirements, high uptime, redundancy, low latency. It's one of the highly regulated industry. I know financial organizations are very highly regulated industry, but apart from that, OT is very regulated. So NERC TSA is from the States because I worked for States a lot. But if we look at the Middle East, the Saudi has a OTCC. It's very prescriptive uh, regulation. Then UAE has its own regulation, like Abu Dhabi has for the Department of Energy for the power. Then Dubai has for their power as well, and then European Union has right now the NIS2 regulation, and the second thing, the European Union is also publishing the Cyber Resiliency Act, which means for the vendors who provide equipment must be secure. Same thing happening with the Asian countries as well. So regulations are ramping up in the OT space, especially 2022 was where most standards were written. And then why it's a lot of it's a geopolitical conflict as well, because it's we call it cyber warfare, right? Geopolitical conflict involves a lot of cyber attacks. Now, let me quickly explain this. In the IT, when we say about levels, we mostly talk about, if your background was a network, mostly we talk about OSI layers, like a 7 OSI layers or TCP/IP5 layers. But in the OT, you will hear a lot about Purdue model. Purdue model is not a security model. Purdue model is a reference architecture. So it is a reference architecture in order to use for the OT network segmentation. Sometimes I call it timing model because here we require more real time, here less real time, so on and so forth. So Purdue model, let's say the zones and levels. Look at this. Let's look at this, because anything when we talk about network segmentation, implementing the OT cybersecurity controls, we reference to Purdue a lot. But that Purdue model is a little bit changing nowadays. But let's talk the classics. So in level 5, you have an enterprise network. This is your IT environment. This is where you have, you just name it, your HR systems, finance systems, so on and so forth. Then you come here level 4, or it can be 1 sometimes. Here, this is something like an ERP system, billing system, logistics system, which is related from the information which comes from the here. But let me see. No, please. Which this but sometimes it can be 1 level. And then you have a demilitarized zone. Demilitarized zone, we all know it, DMZ. It's like the police checking it here, yes. And a lot of time we have a jump servers here, and then we go to the level 3 zone. So from here, we call it OT responsibility starts. So most of the time when they say OT cybersecurity engineer or OT cyber, their responsibility comes down from the DMZ and below. Usually this firewall IT, this firewall OT guys. So in the level 3, usually we do have site operations, and then level 2, we do have so let's say you have a different sites, one in Cairo, another one in Sharm el Sheikh. Let's say you have 2 sites, and those sites, let's say this is one Cairo, and then in level 3 you might be connecting Cairo, Sharm el Sheikh through one to the level 3 to one SCADA server, for example. I'm just giving an example. And then level 2 is usually local supervisory network. And then level 1 is basic control, and this is a process. Though when it comes to the timing, this communication actuators with this or with this is very crucial rather than this and this. So the more we grow, the more time is less, like here is milliseconds, then seconds, then can be minutes maybe, and so on and so forth. This is a Purdue model. Okay. So OT system require different contexts, as I explained to you. So WSS might not be in DMZ, might be business critical. Engineering work, so you need to familiarize with yourself. What is the engineering workstation? What is the automation service? What is the DCs? All other terminologies that you need to be aware. As I said, in IT is way more easier than here. So crown jewel analysis. So we need to make sure that in the ICS, I think I heard from the Mustafa about crown jewel. Crown jewel here is a little bit different. So not all the ICS devices and system are the same because we cannot secure 100%. So if we look here, so I'm not gonna read quickly, I'm gonna sell it. So these are the specific provider within an industry discipline, geographic region. This is a collection of assets and facilities. This is required principal tasks such as heating and cooling. This is a physical asset. This is a direct connection, and then this is a critical data, which are the crown jewels. If we take it as an example, let's say if you have a refinery, I'm sure YouTube has a refinery. In the this is your site refinery. In the refinery, you have a boiler house unit. In the boiler house, you have a different, I would say, functions. In the functions, you have different assets such as compressors, and then from there you have different controllers, and then from here you have your crown jewels, which are real like for example DCS analyzers, so on and so forth. So you have to know what is this. So sliding scale of cybersecurity, I do like this slide because I do think you might know from the SANS. If we start from here, it becomes expensive. So we do love to have an active defense. Offense, we want to make sure it's last. So we love to have from the architecture, then passive defense, active defense, intelligence, then offense. So this is a sliding scale of cybersecurity, we call it. If you start from the beginning, it's less expensive. If you start from here, it's more expensive. So the last 5 minutes I just want to say is OT cybersecurity is doable, but you have a huge responsibility because any of your mistake can cost a life, can cost several $1,000,000, can cost a reputational damage, can cost environmental damage as well. So the risks are super high, so the accountability. And it's very hard to implement whatever NIST says in everything in CSF. It is best practice to follow. So in our world, we follow ISO 62443, but ISO 62443 is very extensive. You have to start from ISO 62443, and it takes you years to implement this. Then the second thing is NIST. NIST, if it's a CSF, it has 6 pillars, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. All of these are cool, but it also requires extensive multi-years of the implementation. And then sometimes business needs, like your boss will say, no, I need to connect to the cloud, I need to use AI, or you need to show you need a quick wins. And especially nowadays, a lot of companies are looking for quick wins, and then I will start implementing whatever is required. So based on this, I love SANS. SANS has a lot of good stuff, and they do a lot of research. What SANS did, SANS went ahead, looked at all the threat intelligence reports, all the attacks that happened in the ICS environment with the Dragas. They looked up all the attacks, then they looked up all the vulnerabilities, then they looked up, okay, what was the controls that were effective, or that the controls that is needed, the top controls that will have a most risk reduction in the OT environment. So that's why you can go ahead and download 5 ICS cybersecurity controls from the SANS. So they came up that ICS incident response plans must be there as number one. So you need to have a playbooks, not the IT incident response plan. No, you need to have proper related to the OT environment. Even jump box, jump backpack is a different in the OT. Then the next one is a defensible architecture. For example, there was an attack in the Canada to I think Suncor oil and gas. But it wasn't. Most of the attack happens in the IT because ransomware most of the time is happening there. What they did is you need to make sure that from the GMZ level you can disconnect from the IT and continue your operation. So this is very important that if the attack is happening in the IT side, you can be independently continue your operation. That is called defensible architecture. Then visibility is the key. So one of the attack what happened is the Colonial Pipeline. It happened in the United States in 2021. It caused a massive panic, and then because they provide the gas to entire East Coast, and that was the first time an attack. The attack happened in the IT environment, and they encrypted the billing system. But the problem was the asset owners, they didn't know whether the attacker went to the OT environment or not because they didn't have any visibility. So as I said, in the OT environment, unfortunately, protocols are not encrypted, and we need to make sure that we need to have a visibility. And then in OT environment, again, in IT, we can tighten up no remote access control, or access control will be here and there. But in the OT, we have a lot of dependency on the vendors. Vendors can come and update, or like I was one of the what was it, tobacco company manufacturing. They said they cannot just disable the remote connection. It needs to be connected, especially on night shift. Vendors needs to be connected in order to troubleshoot in any case if there is something is wrong. That's why you want to make sure that you're monitoring, and then in order to connect them using the secure remote access. And secure remote access, not the tiny VPN. It is different secure remote access that we're using for the OT environment. There are a lot of vendors available. And the risk-based vulnerability management. So risk-based vulnerability management means, as I said, we cannot patch. We cannot go ahead and patch. Log4j came out, we cannot patch tomorrow. It's almost near to impossible. So as I said, there is a Windows XP still running, Windows 7. Yes, we accept that. That's why risk-based vulnerability management system states, according to the research, there is 100, let's say, only 2% of the 100% out of the 100 is a critical patch that we need to patch today. Then around 32% is we need to patch it in near future, and other 60% we need to patch it like in our next maintenance window. So that's why vulnerability management is very, very important in the OT environment. As I said, we just cannot go ahead and patch tomorrow, or it's, as I said, in IT, or every week even. It's very, very complicated. So if you, this is a quick wins I'm just giving you. Of course, defense in depth, there are, according to the NIST controls, yes, it's, or the CIS controls, it's best to follow them. But if you need a quick wins, this is a quick wins. And then if you have done the basics, then you can move on if you want to connect to the cloud, so on and so forth. If you haven't done the basics, I don't think it's good to connect to the cloud or so on and so forth. So again, OT requires a different approach, but it doesn't mean that you cannot work in OT, because we do have a lot of gatekeepers in our industry, unfortunately, because they say, oh, you don't know my production. But at the same time, you need to be an asset owner's shoes. If you came from your corporate IT and going to do some changes in your OT environment, nobody will allow you. Why? Because the risks are too high. That's why this industry is very, very much critical, and it requires big knowledge. And again, I'm hearing a lot of people right now, oh, I know OT, I know OT. The less knowledge is very, very, very dangerous. So in order not to have this, you need to make sure that you know what is your industry environment. So this concludes my speech, and I will start accepting the question. I'm in LinkedIn. I'm very active in LinkedIn. As I said, I'm a global speaker. I just try to put this into the 1 hour. You can always reach out to me and ask questions if you need to. I try to reply, but if I'm not replying a week, I will reply eventually because sometimes my inbox gets filled. And my field is only in this OT. If you ask me about anything about IT, I'm not aware what's happening in that world. I'm trying to keep it, but I'm more in the OT space. So I can see the questions. There are some constraints to use some tools like Nmap and other tools in OT environments. What is the best practice, or what is the consideration to do an OT penetration testing from the owner's point of view and from the OT penetration tester point of view? Well, pen testing in OT is very, very complicated. Nmap specifically, we call it, if you wanna, you don't need an attacker. You can run the Nmap scan, boom, you can create the DDoS attack in your OT environment. You can just knock everything out. OT penetration testing must be done only by the person who has OT background. This is just there's no question. When I worked in even in CPX, we do have OT pen testers. We do have in the I used to have in Honeywell. All of them is coming with they have been on the site, boots on the ground. They know what is it. So the number one rule is you need to of course we call it rules of engagement, but anyway, you need to identify the black box. Is almost black box only you do if you're breaching from the IT to DMZ. This is when you can use a black box. From DMZ to the OT environment level 3, you might use a little bit of combined gray, but when you go to level 2, no, you don't use you don't use a black box at all. Usually you go with a white box testing, and most of the time you never exploit, you stop it. You say, I found it, and if I exploit it, this will happen. In level 2, level 1, it's, as I said, it's almost, it's not feasible to do. You don't do OT pen testing at all. You go, unless it's in the maintenance window, meaning that if the plant is, a lot of customers try to do during the maintenance window, because maintenance window means that there is no real production going on. It's in the maintenance window, so they try to do penetration testing during that time. So for the Nmap, you can use an Nmap, but you need to have there is a command line specifically is tailored to the OT how you should use it. Like there is a guidelines in the OT, in the Nmap, how to use specifically to the OT. And again, you go, even with a Nessus, you don't scan entire environment. Active almost scanning, you don't do that. So it is possible, but you go with the rules of engagement from level to level. From the Purdue level, again from the IT to DMZ, nothing stops you. Black box from the once you go to from DMZ to level 3, it's still okay. From level 3 below, white box. Level 3 to level 2, maybe they will allow you, but level 2 no. If it's in a real production environment, like for example, the vendors in level 2, they don't allow even to touch for the pen testing. They will say, if you do that, you're gonna lose the guarantee. So this is in most of the cases, and you don't exploit. But it is feasible. I have seen many cases that OT pen testing has been done, but it must be very only professionals. And I know only a couple of people in the world who can do this, and companies who can do this. I hope I answered your question correctly. So we have 8 minutes left. If you have any questions, you can ask. I know I have squeezed it. I didn't talk about attacks, but go ahead and you can Google it, the attacks in OT environment. It's very interesting. It starts with a Stuxnet. Middle East had a lot of attacks, such as Trizes happened in Saudi. Shamoon was an IT set, but Trizes was a safety attack in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine had a black energy where power outage happened. A lot of happened in US as well, and in the European Union as well. It happened in the OT environment attacks as well. And the malware is becoming very much of a sophisticated. And unfortunately, in the OT environment, not a lot of attacks are reported. So it's not all publicly available. Why? Because it says it's a national security, and if they start publicly, especially USA, they have to disclose it. But in many countries, if they put it out there in the internet, they can cause a panic in and then they don't like to do it, unfortunately. So a lot of attacks in the OT are not reported, or they just say it's a process safety. So any other questions? So hopefully after this you get inspired to, and then it's very interesting field, but it's very, I would say, in the parallel challenging field. It's not easy. Even though I have seen a lot of people claim to be OT using ChatGPT, it doesn't work like that. Okay, anybody questions? No, ISO 62443 is not easy to use. It's not a one standard, but it is doable. You need to, in order to be ISO 62443, so there is two things. ISO 62443 has a tires, meaning it has 4 tires and several standards for each tire. The first tire is a generic, which is terms and terminologies. Second one is for asset owners and operators. It's mainly about implementing the cybersecurity management systems, patch management systems, all of risk assessments. Then the tier 3 is for the integrators, because in the OT integrators play a huge role. And then tier 4 is mainly related to the manufacturers, providers of this PLC and then systems. They need to follow the SDLC, and plus they have to be certified in ISO 62443. So when we say certified means human can be certified, and then the manufacturers must certify their devices, components, systems. And for the human, unfortunately, ISO 62443 is not free standards. They are all paid. You can get a membership. I do think it's, if you get a membership, you get a free access to all the standards in ISA, not only 62443, but other standards as well. And I don't think membership is very expensive. I do think it provides a 50% of the discount for some specific countries, and you can get it there. Read, just to go ahead and read it. And the second thing, if you want to get certified, unfortunately, ISO 62443, you cannot go ahead such as CISSP or OCP, go and just pay to the certificate and pass it. No, it's mandatory to attend their training, then go to you will be eligible to go to the certification. And it has 4 certificates. So I think it's a fundamentals, implementation or something, risk implementation, and then at the end of the day it's expert. If you want to just learn without certification, again, get the membership in order so you have access to all the new standards. It's less than $100. And the second thing is there are many, the good thing is right now, last 3 years, a lot of people started recording. A lot of people in LinkedIn and in my industry, OT cybersecurity professionals, started publishing the blogs, interpretation of the standard, and a lot of conferences as well. They're all recorded and they're all in YouTube. So you can, if you Google ISO 62443, and you will see a lot of YouTube videos and the blogs. But at the same time, just get a membership in order to read it, and then you'll understand how you can use it in your environment. But ISO 62443 gives you what, not how. How comes with an experience. So every person, how many people I have interviewed, how many people I have talked to, so anyone who even touched or just a little bit heard or worked a little bit in OT cybersecurity, they all say, claim to know ISO 62443. But in real life, the implementation is tough. So you need to learn first what, and then learning the how will be great if you have some mentor or somebody else to follow and start implementing it. How comes with an experience usually. So hope I answered your question. IC64 is something, and I do love NIST 882. Let me post it here. You can go ahead. It's like a very much explains from the beginning what is ISIS, what is OT, what is ICS. A lot of references I took from NIST. You can just, it's free. You can print it and you can read it before you sleep. A very good reference. So I think 2 minutes left. If you have a question, happy to answer. If you're not, and I'm here in the LinkedIn, as I said, feel free to reach out. And there are many people whom to follow. I think somebody yesterday posted specific people whom to follow. And thankfully, a lot of reports like Dragos and Threat Intel, the Waterfall also Threat Intel, they're putting it for free, threat intelligence, to the public, so you can read it, what's happening in the OT environment. And the more we go, the more it becomes critical, because it's like a banking mobile, you know, that was 20 years ago with IT. Now everything is digital. Same thing is happening in OT now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sultanat, for your time and your informative presentation. Now we have reached the end of our event. I would like to thank you, Engineer Mustafa and Engineer Sultanat, for this great session. Thank you all for joining us today. The recording will be published soon, inshallah. Follow our meetup page and our social media pages for the recording and for the upcoming session. OWASP is open source community managed by volunteers. We encourage everyone to participate and support. So if anyone has an AppSec session to talk, we are really happy for him to join and be our next event speaker. Have a good day and thank you.
Thank you.